if you try to bottle up your feelings, you actually get more of the very thing you don't want. Plus, the interesting thing about this science, when you try to bottle up the pain, you also snuff out your capacity for joy and happiness too. It's like one funnel. So when you cork the negative stuff, you cork your ability to feel good.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. When I first started Well, Hello Anxiety, I was asked if there were any particular guests I would dearly love to have and love to have the opportunity to talk to and to bring their wisdom to you. And today's guest is one of those very special people, Dr. John Forsyth. John is a professor of psychology and director of the Anxiety Disorders Research Program at the University at Albany in New York. He's a clinical psychologist. He's also a clinical supervisor. He's a highly sought-after teacher and trainer in the use of acceptance and commitment therapy. He's an author of many books, and one of which I have right in front of me today, Anxiety Happens, 52 Ways to Find Peace of Mind. He is also a TED speaker. And I first discovered Dr. John Forsyth's work when I read a letter to readers in Dr. Chris McCurry's book. And when I read the letter that Dr. Forsyth wrote to us as readers in Dr. McCurry's book, I was really taken by his compassion, his warmth, and I immediately became quite drawn to his approach. And one particular line that stood out for me was this: doing something new is exactly what is called for when doing more of the same is not working. And so, John, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'd love for you to tell us what you meant when you wrote that particular line.
Well, thank you first for having me, Jodie, for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here and with all your listeners. I think that line comes from a place where many people will get stuck in a struggle where they, especially with their own experiences, where they keep doing basically more of the same, hoping that eventually things will change. And, for many of us, that is, trying to cope with our thoughts and emotions that are painful, or maybe avoiding certain situations. There's a whole host of strategies that are kind of basically like fighting, and struggling. And so, in the West, especially, I know in the United States and probably in Australia too, that there is that message that, if you don't feel well, if you feel pain, that's a problem and you need to fix it, and then you'll be happy. And so a lot of people get caught up in that sort of like struggle with themselves. Once I feel better, then I can live my life. And so the issue really is to look at that. And if that's not working, maybe it's time to do something radically different, which is what ACT offers, I think, many people.
It's certainly my experience. I came to ACT in a serendipitous moment, actually, when I was talking to Dr. Jo Mitchell when I was wearing a different hat many years ago, and she introduced me to the idea of ACT and to the concept of changing our relationship with our thoughts and feelings rather than trying very, very hard to change them. And it's been so powerful in my life, and I've pursued ACT from a professional perspective as well as applying it daily in my own life. And that's why in naming the podcast, Well, Hello Anxiety, the idea of turning around and doing something different. And I recall in your TED Talk that you were a beautiful TED Talk, by the way, so engaging to listen into. And thank you for sharing your story. And I remember that one moment where you said, well, you were running, but you sort of metaphorically stopped and turned around. And can you tell us a bit more about the way you came to ACT and whether or not at that point that was a part of your repertoire?
Yeah, so I was trained in, the traditional behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy approaches, which, usually focus on like thoughts and feelings as the problem, and then strategies to kind of change what you think and change how you feel, and then you can get your life back. And so uh, I came to ACT before it was really called ACT. I was in graduate school, and I saw an article by Steve Hayes, who's one of the founders of ACT, and I said, "What is this stuff that they're talking about, like meaning and purpose and living your life and your heart and what you care about and passion and all those sort of bigger picture questions that I think many people are concerned about, but they might have lost sight of, because the pain becomes so central." Um, so I started to dig into that a bit, and I was like, wow, that they are talking about you don't need to change what you think and how you feel. You need to change your relationship with what you feel and what you think. So what we started with, that idea of like warfare, like trying to push out your thoughts and, stuff them down or change them, or your feelings, it's really kind of a war with yourself, which is unkind. And it's like, how can you win a fight with yourself? How can you run from yourself? Do you need to fight that fight? And I found that the traditional strategies, now, traditional CBT does work, so I don't want to kind of whack that. But in the long term, it is effortful to constantly monitor your thinking and to challenge your thoughts and to try to kind of push your feelings down or get them into some kind of box before you can take a step, versus changing your relationship with what you feel and what you think. So just like, many people have relationships with others, like whether it's your children, a partner, spouse, friend, neighbor, you can always ask, well, how do I stand in relation to them? And then you can look at your feelings and thoughts like another person. So when they show up and they're not pleasant, how do you stand in relation to those thoughts and feelings? Where you're like this, sort of like, or are you open to them even if you don't like everything your mind and body gives you? So
That's the reference that you just made in terms of how we respond to our thoughts. I recall reading in Anxiety Happens that you ask us as readers to perform an exercise where we sort of picture having our thoughts and feelings written on a piece of paper and putting our hands together as if we were praying, hands up, and pressing them together and pressing them so hard
yeah.
and thinking about the tension and the difficulty in doing that versus getting that piece of paper and laying it in our lap and
Mm-hmm.
just reducing that struggle, that our thoughts and feelings are still with us, but they're not stopping us from doing other things. And like you say, when you wait to get your thoughts and feelings in a box that feels contained, and I use the reference to having all your ducks in a row and feeling good to be able to take a step. Gosh, it's a wonder that we get much done in our one precious life, as when we are struggling with an approach that requires so much effort and energy of us to manage.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing you said, Jody, is the manage part. Like, I think one of the truths in life and the human experience is that life invites obstacles, problems, and pain. There's no escaping that truth, I think, as long as you're a living, breathing human being. But the suffering is
Mm.
different. And a lot of it is mostly unnecessary. So that when you're fighting and pushing away and kind of like arranging your day around not thinking something or not feeling something, that's energy and attention away from the things that could bring you joy and the things that you do care about and the things you want to be about. So it is almost like turning your back. Like, in my experience, uh, it wasn't until, I discovered ACT and started to apply it in my life where I really realized that, a lot of the things I was doing that on the surface looked healthy were actually moves away from the actual difficulty that was going on in my life, in my previous marriage, and those kinds of things that I didn't want to face. So I was literally like,
Mm.
working 24/7, which, I enjoyed my work. I love writing. I love teaching. I love sharing what I know. So on the surface, you probably wouldn't say, why are you into therapy? Because you enjoy your work. But I was using that as a clever way to not deal with the real problems at home and in my life. So, uh, but that's all effortful. Even the science shows that it's like what you resist persists. It's like a lot of your listeners will probably understand that. But there's a whole science now that shows that wisdom is actually true. And it's not just a guru or somebody passed it down. There's like studies that show if you try to bottle up your feelings, you actually get more of the very thing you don't want. Plus, the interesting thing about this science, when you try to bottle up the pain, you also snuff out your capacity for joy and happiness too. It's like one funnel. So when you cork the negative stuff, you cork your ability to feel good, which I found fascinating when I heard that. It's really the power we have as human beings is maybe not the pain that shows up from outside, because a lot of that's outside of our control, including the things we carry, all the things we've lived through, the good, bad, ugly. There's no delete button with that. So it's already in there. We carry that. It's part of our history. So it's there anyways. So if it's there, when it's triggered, we may not choose what's triggered, but we can choose how we respond to it. And it turns out how we respond matters a great deal. So like we were talking about, one response is to be at war with this stuff when it shows up, to try to run from it, duck from it, hide, beat yourself up for thinking something or feeling something that's already there. Another way is to be open to it, to be gentle and kind with yourself when it does show up, even if you don't like it. And that's where you have control, is that peace. And it's hard for us to do that. We tend to identify with our thoughts. We identify with our feelings. We identify with things we've lived through. And sometimes that could be useful in terms of going forward, but often if it's painful, it's not. People tend to get stuck in the muck, really, of their past.
Yes, it's and that takes us to the idea of thinking and thinking about things that have passed and that are in the past, things that have happened, and our minds, of course, also take us into the future. And I'd really love for you to share with our listeners your wisdom and your understanding and the science around what we know now about thoughts and about worries, because for those of us that have anxiety, and I manage my worries, I understand fusion and diffusion, and but goodness, worry detracted from my life in a huge way for decades until I learned a new and different way. But I loved particularly in your TED talk and the ACT approach to helping us understand what are thoughts, because we put our eggs in that basket, don't we? That if we think it, it must be true. It must be an instruction, or it must be something that we need to follow or listen to or act on. And yet, ACT helps us to understand exactly what our thoughts are. I'd love it if you could speak more to that, please.
Yeah, that's a big question, but I'll try to do my
Oops,
best.
sorry.
I think of it sort of this way, that all of us come into the world more or less the same way, right? There are two little eyes looking out in the world, but there is no you the way you know that now. You don't know your name. There are no memories of any past. There's no thoughts about a future. There's no judgment, blame, thinking, but there are two little eyes. And then very quickly, if you can kind of imagine a timeline, this is that you, it's pretty much like an empty vessel. Very quickly, we start to collect experiences. They get plopped in: the first birthday, the first time you got to the school bus, the first time you were bullied, the first love, the first loss, the time you skinned your knee, the trauma, the accident. Even now, we're dropping things in. So language and cognition, or thinking, is part of the stuff that gets dropped in. It comes out of our social world. That we humans have a unique capacity to use language, and the way I talk about it is to communicate with meaning and respond with understanding. So it's not just commands, like a vocal command to your dog to sit. No, it's actually to understand the nuances of that in a situation, the meaning of it. Like, that's a piece of cake in the US could mean, like, point to, like, birthday party, that's a piece of cake. Or it can mean something like, oh, I can do that. I can do that easy. It's a piece of cake, like, so other animals can't respond, don't know those nuances, right? It's a cake is a cake, but we can decipher meaning, and we learn that at a young age. So the way I like to think of the mind then is like an expanding spider web. Like, words get connected to things and you in the past and the future. There's judgment, and it just continues. This network expands. So there's no delete. And that's important. There's no like, oh, just get rid of that thought and that thought will go away. That's not how our nervous systems work. They work by addition, not subtraction. So things just keep getting added into that vessel, and the network keeps expanding. And that's what the mind does. So if that's how the mind works, it's always relating and connecting the dots. There's no healthy way to stop that. Then there's the you that was there before that, right? So it's actually looking at thoughts. It's that observer perspective. To look at this as not you, because you were there before the traumatic thought. You were there before the worry. There was a you there before, so you can't be it if there was a you there before that got plopped in. That thoughts are in there too. So if we take the perspective of more of the container, instead of identifying with the thoughts, we can start to ask questions like, is the thought useful to me? And when I say that, I mean helpful. Like, one, you could check in with your emotional weather. When I listen to the thought, do I feel better or worse? More importantly, when I listen to the thought, do I do more with my life? Am I living consistent with my passions, what I care about, or does it make me small? And if the answer is I feel worse and it makes me small, then maybe we should look at that like web, that thought in the web, and just see it for what it is, which is a thought that the mind creates. And so that's the skill. Instead of like identifying with the web, I am that, it's more like I can notice that. So the what if thoughts are just part of that. They're about the future. Thoughts about the future. Many people think, imagine this, Jody, that you and I had a crystal ball and you and I could see every single moment coming down the pipe. Like with, perfect precision. Like somebody could walk up to you you have your crystal ball and you could say, well, next week, Thursday at 4 p.m., this is exactly what you're going to be doing and feeling. Here's what's going on in the world. You would be the most famous, wealthy person on the planet if you had that crystal ball. But that's what worry in the mind tries to fool us into thinking, is that when you what if I get fired? Immediately, the mind says, well, you could get fired. You might. And in fact, you are going to, right? And that's a thought about the future. The future, by definition, is unknowable, right? That's why it's the future. But the mind can create thoughts about the future, right? Thoughts, oh, this could happen and that can happen. And I think a lot of us get stuck and suffer because we don't see that that's what's going on. And then it leads to disappointment. Like, okay, the holidays are coming up. I see everybody getting together and having fun and laughing. And then something happens. You get to the holidays and it's not the way your mind created it to be. So your mind had one image, like, this is how it's going to go. And now you get to, and I'm not saying this is going to happen to you, Jody, but you get to Christmas or however you celebrate, and everybody's sick. Everybody's got got colds, and everybody's in their pajamas, and they don't really feel like doing anything. But you had this image of like, oh, everybody's going to get together, and it's going to be wonderful. And then you actually get to that point. Your lived experience is so different, and then we suffer because why wasn't it that way? My mind said it was going to be this way, but it turned out to be that way. Instead of seeing that these are thoughts. So I think that's really important for people to see. So it's not that you're having the thoughts. It's really the question is, are they serving you well? Is your mind your best friend?
And that comes back to that question of, well, first of all, having the ability to be able to, which we all have and can cultivate, to be
Yeah.
able to notice, and then to ask that question: is it helpful? Is this helpful?
Yeah.
And that's been a life-changing skill for me, and for many, I know, in relating differently rather than buying into it. And the the change in your life experience when you can learn to observe what you're thinking and then make a judgment as to whether or not it's going to enrich your life or make it smaller, as you say. It's so powerful. And so how, for people listening who want to help cultivate these skills, and just as an aside, every now and again I jump on the microphone alone and record an episode to help build everyone's toolkit around anxiety. And I did an episode on metacognition, and I did an episode on diffusion. And so I'd love you to talk a little bit more about how you work with patients that you see, and how when you're training other clinicians, where do you start in helping people to, first of all, see their thoughts for what they are, words and ink, as you say, if we
Mhm.
write them down, and
Yeah.
then get that distance and that space? Where do you start when you're helping people to develop those skills?
Mm, I start with perspective, like the perspective of that vessel. See, that's the thing. Like,
Mm,
some of your listeners are probably saying, well, what is he saying? Like, do we have soul, consciousness? Like, is there spirit? Like, you don't have to go to the metaphysical. I think you could if you want to, if it's useful to. But the bottom line, I think, is that all of us humans have two capacities. One is to identify with everything that was dumped in our vessel from the moment we came into this world to now, to the very end. Identify with the stuff that gets plopped in, or we could shift to that observer perspective, the container that's always been there, the you that was there
mm,
before anything was dropped in, before you had a name. There was two eyes looking out on the world. So all of us humans have the capacity to shift to be more an observer, which is really powerful when the stuff that gets dropped in is painful. When the things that get plopped into your history are painful, it's helpful to recognize that you are not that, right? So I'm very interested in sort of like even concepts beyond act of like who and what you are. And we tend to fool ourselves into thinking we're just the stuff that's in the vessel, but there's another you that can notice. So, but perspective is everything. And if you have the gift of sight, you know what this is like, that you've been taking perspective your entire life. Like, look around the room you're in, if you can, and you can notice, like, oh, there's a painting. I can see one behind you, Jody. There's curtains in my room. There's a lamp over here. You can notice those things, but when you notice them, it doesn't turn you into the lamp or the painting or the flowers or what you notice, but you can notice. Like, I can see that. I can notice. You can do that outside of you, and you can also do it with what goes on inside. The same thing you've been doing your entire life, noticing. You can also do it on the inside. I can notice that thought. I can notice that sensation in my body. I can notice that old memory. I can notice that feeling. And it's almost like from the safety of the shore. You can
mm,
notice, just as you can notice outside, you could turn that awareness inside, which means that you can't be it. You understand that
mm.
if
Yes.
you were the thought, you would not be able to notice it. If you were the feeling, you would not be able to notice it, but you can. And you have lots of practice with that. So that is the practice, and I think it's really helpful, like you said, thoughts on paper or cards, is to put them down and look at what you wrote down. And you can always tell that you're having a thought if you can write it down, right? So
Mm,
I'm hungry is a thought. It may have some physical kinds of bits going along with it, like you feel the growling in your stomach and you're thinking about food and the urge, but you can write it down. I'm hungry. I'm tired. It's beautiful outside. That's a thought. Um, I love my partner, all the way to I'm worthless, I'm stupid, I'm wrong, I'm a table, I'm a banana is a thought. I mean, they're all, when you put them down on paper, they're all the same stuff. Like I sometimes talk
Mm,
about the mind being a thought generating machine. This is what it does. It's just cranking out thoughts all the time. And so we don't need to trust or believe everything it gives us. So the first thing is to practice putting them out there to look at. So they're on paper. So you can see them just like you could see the lamp and the curtain and the trees outside. You can notice the thoughts. And then once you do that, the next important question is to ask, well, that thought, if I buy into it, give it a lot of importance, do I feel better or do I feel worse? Do I do more with my life or do I do less? Is it helpful or really is it unhelpful? Right?
mm,
So when you start to answer those questions, so maybe the thought, if it's not helpful, if it makes you feel worse and you do less when you listen to it, then the practice is to allow it to come and go, not to attach to it.
and that's a difficulty, isn't it? If a person is having a thought that somebody who has OCD that believes they're having a thought that they ran over an animal when they felt a bump in the road, or that they stole something, or that they poisoned someone, or that they're going to lose their job, or that they might have a serious illness. Writing that down, it's it's identifiable as a thought, but that it brings with it a lot of pain. It brings with it the suffering that and that we know that's why they can make life so much smaller. And when you talk about that openness and that acceptance, you're referencing the idea that it's okay to feel what we feel, and that with that pain, that instead of trying to do what isn't helpful, what hasn't worked, which is push it away, stuff it down, not experience it, the idea is to make room for it. And I'd love you to talk us through that. And how do you support people to sit with discomfort that can end up quite difficult to sit with? How do you help people to do that?
Okay, so you're talking about the big W word, which I call willingness, which I think is everything here. So willingness is a choice, not a feeling, the way we think about it.
Mm,
So it is a choice to be almost like a leap of faith, to be open to whatever arises, especially things you have no control of, like what you think and feel any particular moment. You might have a little bit of control, but in the sense of a light switch, turning it off, nobody has that switch. I mean, I know a lot of unhealthy switches to turn it off, substance
mm,
use, just staying in your house 24/7, but no healthy way to turn it off. So willingness is a choice. And I think what's really important is for people to make a distinction between the physical sensations in their body versus what their mind tells them about them. So really important that the willingness, and I do think this is a powerful way to disarm fear and anxiety, is to be open to what your body does and to catch your thoughts about it. Like I work with a lot of people with panic and agoraphobia, and there's a lot of big thoughts inside the fears. It's like, what if I panic? What if this happens? What if I'm alone and I can't get help? And oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, or I'm gonna have a panic attack. My heart's pounding. It's bad. Instead of, there's my heart racing. It's a sensation.
mm,
Just like if you did happen to get the booster shots or the immunizations for COVID, people had a range of physical side effects. What if anxiety and fear, if that part of it was just like getting a shot or getting the flu? You notice soreness. There's a sensation of soreness. I notice my temperature is up. There's a sensation of chills. Here's the sensation of fatigue versus, oh my God, that's terrible. What's going on with me? I can't do anything because that, like that's the mind now smearing the actual experience with judgment, evaluation, predictions about the future, reminders of the past. So it's like to see that the willingness is, are you willing to feel what your body is actually doing as it is? There's a thumping sensation. There's a sensation of tightness. And then there's your mind chattering away saying, that's terrible. This could be the big one. You can't do it. Something's wrong with you. There's all that chatter. And then you just have the sensation. Are you willing to feel the sensation? And the question I follow with is, pick a sensation in your body that's hard for you, and then ask yourself this, is that sensation, that one sensation, really your enemy? Something you absolutely can't feel. I've worked with some people. Now, we're not looking at the mind trying to be a smart aleck with this, and say, ha ha, yes, it is. But when people honestly really think about that, most people will say, no, I can feel it. In fact, I've felt it before. I felt it last summer when I was outside. It was hot and muggy, and I was taking care of doing yard work. I felt the sweatiness and my heart pounding. I've felt that before. So it's not my enemy. But in the moment, it's hard for people to see that because the thoughts come rushing in. All the old relations, that relational network gets activated. And that's all they see is the judgment and the predictions and the evaluation.
Yes. And the stories that our mind generates. I thank you for that explanation. It's you've got such a really beautiful way with words, and you, as you said, you love writing, but you're equally brilliant at explaining these concepts to us and helping us to look at these experiences from a different perspective, which is, it's about perspective. And like you say, that if we were to sprint to chase after someone, a long lost friend, running down, well, then we might be sweating and the heart's racing, and we're feeling, most of the physiological side effects of anxiety, or the physiological symptoms of anxiety. And yet, because the perspective is different, there's not the layer of the storytelling that the mind has to say about it, especially with people who panic, because the panic comes from the worry about the anxiety that's building and what will happen, doesn't it? And it spirals. Am I right in that
Yeah. Yes.
explanation?
Yeah. And
Yes.
yeah. And the mind can be very clever with things like, keeping you small and safe, in different ways by like, oh, don't do that. That could be risky. That could be dangerous. But those are thoughts. So, I've never worked with anybody who's been eaten by, somebody with panic or anxiety problems who's actually been eaten by a lion or tiger or bear. Like, but the mind responds that way to life. Like they'll literally be eaten and swallowed. And I think that, but what's really if you step back, what is it? And it's like, are you willing to be with yourself? Like to be with everything that you carry in your vessel up to this point, the stuff that shows up, even if you don't like it. Like the example I give sometimes is, if people have a pet, most people will say like, oh yeah, I know, like pet puppy or kitten, or maybe it's a newborn baby. It could be that too. And so you love your puppy or kitten or baby, you enjoy it, but do you like everything it does? Like when your baby gets you up at 3 a.m. and is, throws up on your shoulder, your new dress or your suit, but you still love your baby. Maybe it's the same way with our emotions and thoughts. Like maybe we could still love ourselves, even if we don't like everything our body does and everything our mind creates. That we could still bring that friendliness to ourselves and that gentleness. So, if somebody with a friend of yours or something came to you with the anxiety and difficulty you carry and struggle with, and they shared it openly with you, would you be harsh and critical? Using a harsh tone of voice, wagging your finger, telling them like, they're worthless and something's wrong with them, and they're broken and they'll never change? Or would you be gentle and kind and supportive? Would the tone of voice be like you would have if you were talking to a little infant or a puppy or a kitten? Would it be gentle and loving? Most people will say that yes, that's how they would respond. And so can we now give that to ourselves? In our own woundedness, in our own pain of life as human beings, can we apply that same response to ourselves? And that's where we have control, not the stuff that gets, conjured out of our vessel, that gets triggered, that's in there. But can we, when it does show up, can we meet it with a kinder, more compassionate response, and keep our hearts centered on what we do want to spend our time doing in this short life? Nobody's going to care in the end whether anyone was able to control their anxiety or depression. I've never heard at a funeral someone say, she was great at managing her depressogenic thoughts, and he was really good at coping with his worry. No, that's not what people want to hear. They want to hear things like, he was a good father, a good friend, hard worker, loyal, caring, supportive, creative, whatever your words are, but not about your emotional weather, And so I think, the time that we don't need to let anxiety and other forms of pain control us, we just have to learn that there's more to us than that, and to practice responding differently to it. And it is a practice. And that's why I think of ACT as not a therapy. It's bigger than a therapy. I think it is a way of living. It's a way of navigating the bumps of life, the things that come from outside and the things that we carry that get triggered and are in our face. It's to keep going forward when life is hard. How to do and make the most out of this precious life, even when it's difficult, even when we have the difficult things we carry. So yeah, it's a practice. It's a lifelong practice. Like, I'm no expert. I still get hooked and tripped up. Yeah.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that. It's because it's human. It is human, but we get hooked. We get caught in a thought. It happened to me last night. I was noticing a pain and in my abdomen, and my mind went to the worst case scenario. But I was hooked there for a little while. I don't know how long, maybe a minute or two, or maybe less. But then I was able to notice that I was hooked, and I was able to recognize that I was experiencing a sensation and that I was having a thought. And was it helpful? And in that moment, it wasn't, because I was trying to get to sleep. And I know that if it continues and it's an issue, then I go and get the help that I need, or get seen to. And yes, it's this incredible freedom, and it's exciting to think that you don't have to keep waiting. You don't have to keep waiting for everything to be exactly how you want it to be, to feel how you want to feel emotionally or physically, or to look how you want to look, or to have what you want to have before you can take that step forward. And the idea of values-driven action is such a large part of this amazing way of living that we know to be ACT. And perhaps as we draw to a close today in our conversation, I wonder if you could share a little about how people might start on that journey towards what's really meaningful and important for them, how they might identify even. Not everyone understands exactly or knows what's important to them. How might people start in that direction towards what matters?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I wish we had more time to really dive into that one, but let me just go with one way is you can look to the pain that you struggle with for clues. So sometimes the anxiety is there to tell you something. It's like in the West, we have this idea that, emotional psychological pain is the enemy. But what if it was a teacher? What if it's there to alert
Mm.
you to something like maybe your life is off course? Maybe you are not putting enough time into what really matters to you. You're spending too much time with your emotional weather or not doing things. So that's something to be anxious about or depressed about. So if we can look to the pain as like maybe
Mm.
it's like a little wake up call, like it keeps showing up because something's off with the way you're living your life or maybe the way you're relating to yourself. Um, but more broadly, I think is to connect with your heart. Like I like to think of values as, that we talk about them in act as not goals, they're a direction. So like if you value being a good parent, as long as you have kids, there's always more you could do. You'll never be done. You never could tick it off. If you value creativity, there's always more you could do. Or leading others or making a difference, there's always more you could do. Um, so that's like the values, and you live your values by your actions. So I, people get hung up with the words of values. Well, I care about intimacy or connection, and it stays at that level. So I want you to go deeper. Like I want this to be more like a hell yes kind of thing. Like, I'll give you like, if I can come up, just a general example. Working with a client who really cared about his teenager, but was severely agoraphobic, homebound for 30 years, and wouldn't leave except a 5 mile radius. He could drive the 5 miles, but not beyond that. Or I guess I don't know kilometers exactly the conversion, but we can use
Yes.
5 kilometers. 5 kilometers, we'll say the same thing. And so
Yes.
I asked him. I said, "Suppose your daughter was 5.1 kilometers away outside that bubble. What would you do?" And he said, "I would just get in my car. I would speed to her. And you're the only one that can help her." He said, "I'd get in my car. I'd go through red lights, stop signs, and I would go to her aid and help her." And I said, "Isn't that interesting?" It was like I use the words hell yes. Like it was that
Hmm.
heart thing. So I think it's really important for people to connect with where are those places in their life where it's like, that's so important to me. Like there is no compromise versus like, yeah, I could try to like tell a story about it or convince myself, but it's more like, I really love this. This is really important to me. This lights me up. This is where I would say that hell yes. Like, even
Mm.
if it was difficult, like his panic wasn't going to stay home when he went to help his daughter. But he was willing, that's willingness again, to get in his car and go in the service of being the dad he wanted to be in helping his daughter, uh, and taking his panic with him because there was something more important to
Mm.
him than the fear. There was something more important and that's what I've learned is that, my life courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than the fear. So that's where
Mm.
values come in. Like if it's all just about the fear, your life is going to become that or the anxiety, but it's about more than that. So would you be willing to feel the pain of life and the things you carry if it meant you could live a rich, meaningful life with the anxiety showing up now and then,
Mm.
or with the fear shows up now and then, because it probably will. But the difference is you're doing things that matter to you. So I would encourage people, to really connect with their heart with that. You can look in their past, like what were the things you used to do that would light you up, even as a kid? Like, did you like exploring in the woods? Did you like going to the beach? What was it about doing that? You like the outdoors. Maybe you love nature. Maybe you love being active. Are you active now? Are you outdoors now? Are you stimulating your mind if that was important to you when you were younger, or your creativity, or those kinds of things, or the spirit of play? Do you play anymore? And if
Mm.
not, maybe now's the time to look at where you could start, and even baby steps I think are important. Baby steps will take you up a mountain eventually. So it doesn't have to be a big leap.
Yes.
It doesn't, so break it down into like small little steps that you would say that step reflects something I care about. Even that hell yes. Like I'm going to do it
Mm.
despite my anxiety, despite the fear. It's like, this is more important than that. And so I'm willing
Mm.
to bring whatever my body does and my mind chattering away with me and do that thing.
Oh, gosh, that is just such a powerful lesson for all of us. I love that quote, baby steps will take you up the mountain. And indeed they will. Indeed they will. And you don't have to take them all on the same day. You just keep moving forward and be driven by that direction, that North Star, if you like, that our values as our compass. And we meet our goals along the way, don't we, as we go? And I really appreciate you sharing that insight in just a small amount of time that we had when I did ask you that question. I really
Oh, yeah,
appreciate how you've shared
sure.
that with us. And I am, we could talk all day, I just know it, but I
Yeah.
do want to thank you for your time today and for sharing your heart and your wisdom and expertise with us, and for sharing just some really practical, simple ways. I mean, I say simple, but it's just about making a decision to make it, to get started, isn't it? And to
Hmm.
start with one of the things that we've talked about today, perhaps for our listeners today, maybe think about what John's shared with us, and think about one place that you might like to start. But John, I really am very, very grateful for your time. I thank you for sharing it with us, and wish you well in the lead up to Christmas. And I hope that Christmas is lovely for you, and that you have some lovely downtime, because I know it's been a really full year.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, and same to you, Jody, and your listeners. No, it was a pleasure to be on here today, and I wish we had more time. I would just, maybe close with just, be gentle with yourself too as you go forward. This isn't a horse race, so life is not that. It's just about taking the steps and being mindful of what it is you do care about and want to be about, because if you know what matters to you, it will help you make wise choices. And, you could certainly spend your time with anxiety and all those thoughts, that relational network and struggling. Or maybe it's time to say, I don't want to be about that anymore. I want to be about something
Mm,
else. So discovering what that is, but then also be gentle with yourself, because we all slip and fall. We all sometimes fail to keep our commitments. And the important thing is just to get back on track and take another step, like Jody said. So thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much, John. It's just been an absolute pleasure. I'm really grateful. Thanks again. Take care.
Oh, yeah. You take care.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jody Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodyrichandson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.